Hi, this is Lesson 6, the 12 Spies in Canaan, the kindergarten through 6th grade lesson for January 27th, 2013. Trust, trust, trust. This is a lesson all about trust. The key points you see at the top there, sometimes we're afraid and we fail to trust God's promises. That's a sad and unfortunate result of being sinners and having our sinful nature. That we battle that. We battle our trust in what God says, and it should be so simple. God is all-powerful. God loves us. He says He's going to do something. We believe it. He will do it. But sometimes we still battle that lack of trust. But on God's part, He always keeps His promises. 100% of the time, God's promises are steadfast and sure. And getting into some of the storytelling items, the story begins as the Israelites are on the verge of entering the Promised Land. God has brought them safely across the desert, and now they are on the precipice of the land flowing with milk and honey. People decided they wanted to send spies into the land ahead of time to see what kind of people they would be going up against, and they knew they would be facing these people in battle. And here's the thing, though. God had already promised the people success. He said, I'm going to give you this land. So there was really no need for spies. It didn't matter what they found. God had already told them, listen, I'm going to give you this land. I will give whoever is occupying this land, I will give them into your hand. But for the benefit of the people, God says, okay, send your spies into the land. They select one spy from each tribe, so 12 spies, 12 tribes, and they're each given careful instruction about what they should do while they're in the land and how they should gather information for 40 days, about a month and a third. They're in this land of Canaan gathering information, and when they got back, the whole community gathers together, community of Israel, gathers to see what the spies have brought back, and the spies, majority of them, 10 of them, give a very negative report. They said the people in this land are gigantic, and we have no way of defeating them. They're just too big. And the people hear this report, and they're filled with not trust, but fear. Fear that we're going to get destroyed if we try to take this land. One of the men, Caleb, who ends up being a fantastic leader in Israel, he says no, we should go in and take the land. So you have 10 people saying no, and then you have Caleb and Joshua, who is Moses' successor. He takes over as leader for Israel after Moses dies. Caleb and Joshua are saying, no, we do not agree with the rest of these spies. We will take this land. We will take it with God's help. The other spies continued to insist that this was impossible. They said that the people in this land make us look like we are tiny bugs. That's how big they are. So the people hear this, and like I said before, they are very, very afraid. They say, if we try to do this, we're going to die. And so, as they have done numerous times throughout this journey through the desert, they start to complain, and they grumble against Moses and Aaron. And they say, oh, if we would have just stayed in Egypt. The same thing that they did before God gave them manna and quail, glossing over the fact that they had been slaves in Egypt, that Pharaoh was killing their children in Egypt, and they say, oh, that was so much better when we were in Egypt, much better than out here where we're about to die at the hands of the Canaanites. And their fears made them exaggerate. Joshua and Caleb are still insisting, no, you have to reconsider. It's not just our ability that we're going into battle with, it's God's ability. And when the people hear this again, when they see that Joshua and Caleb are intent on saying, no, we should go take this land, well, they talk about killing Joshua and Caleb and killing Moses and Aaron. So very, very negative, very disappointing reaction. And God expresses His disappointment with the people because what they were demonstrating was a lack of faith. Now what it came down to is they didn't trust God's promise. God had said, I will give you this land, and the people said, no, I don't think you will. I think we're going to die instead. And as Moses does on several occasions too, he pleads for the people. He intercedes for them and says, God, don't strike them down. Your glory is at stake. What will the other nations say if about your special people if you strike them down? And God spares the people. He says that they will still go on, they will still survive, but there will be some consequences. They would be punished. None of the 10 pessimistic spies who had said we can't take it, none of them would now enter the promised land. And the people would wander 40 years now in the desert. That's a long time. That's not something we just quickly step over. 40 years to walk around in the desert after you're right on the edge of the promised land. It's amazing. It's really sad, but that's the punishment. It's actually a blessing from God that didn't just strike them all dead. But yeah, 40 years that they would have to wander now when they had been right at the door to the promised land. And that was 40 years, one for each day the spies had been in the land gathering information. Later on, we're told the 10 spies died of a plague. Caleb and Joshua are spared. They would, like we said before, would become very good leaders for Israel. And now, here's a kind of the interesting part of the story that we don't always think about when we're talking about the 12 spies. The people then kind of go back all the way the other way. And they say, they see that God is unhappy with them for not taking the land. So they say, well, we'll go take it now. Absolutely, let's go into the land and take it. And they just sort of blindly, make a reversal, like kind of this overcorrection. When you're driving and you start to, slide on ice or something, and you jerk the wheel too hard the other way, and it kind of overcorrects, and now you're sliding this way. That's what the people were doing. They had failed to trust in the one way, and God punished them for that. And they said, okay, now we really do trust. And Moses tells them, no, don't. It's too late now. Don't try to take it. God has said you're going to wander 40 years in the desert, and the people don't listen, and they go anyway. Without Moses, without God's power, and they're quickly defeated. They're forced out of the promised land, and they wander. Teaching items, like we said before, it should not have mattered what report the spies brought back. They could have come back and said there's billions and billions of people, and each of them is incredibly strong. It shouldn't have mattered. The result of their report should have had no influence on their decision to enter the promised land, because God was on their side. The greater the enemy, the greater the victory would be that God would give them. The people were right in saying that they would not be able to take the land, and they found that out very well. It would need to be God's power that made this happen. And again, by rebelling against Moses and Aaron, their leaders, the people were really rebelling against God. That's an important thing for us to remember too. When we break the fourth commandment and we rebel against the authorities that God has placed in front of us, over us, that is placed in His stead, it's not just those leaders, those rulers that we're disobeying and rebelling against. We're really saying, God, I don't trust you. I don't trust your rule, and I don't want that rule anymore. So, a lot of really solid truths to go through in this lesson. Truths not just for the kids now at this age, but things that they can remember for the rest of their life. I think this is one of those stories that is so interesting and unique that it sticks in your head. Again, the lesson couldn't be clearer. What God says He's going to do, He will do. And we just trust and believe that He will carry that out. All right, thank you.